Thank you to War Thunder for sponsoring this video. The Great Depression was the worst financial crisis in history. In 1929, the US economy imploded. 1 in 4 workers lost their jobs. 9,000 banks failed, evaporating nearly 1% of the entire economy in a matter of hours. It took one of the largest industrial booms ever seen, driven by a world war, just to get the economy moving again. The years building up to it were marked with a mixture of corporate greed, political delusion, and speculative mania. If that sounds eerily familiar, then it is. For anyone who's studied history, the signs are clear. Today, American household debt has surpassed $18 trillion, more than the entire continent of Latin America and the European Union combined. The average American worker has been stuck with wages that haven't kept up with house prices, sinking further and further into debt. Which isn't just bad for individuals, it exposes everyone to a broader risk. Regional banks are quietly failing, replaced instead with speculative mania, crypto bubbles, AI stocks, and meme-driven IPOs. Markets have broken records for 5 years straight, becoming the new norm. But this is not natural. To those paying attention, it seems like the same forces that drove the 1920s boom and the crash that followed are back. And the system we live in today is far more exposed than it was a century ago. What once took weeks to cascade now happens in real time. And leverage isn't just higher, it's everywhere. Public debt, corporate debt, student loans, all inflated to historic levels. But unlike the 1930s, we're not entering the crisis from a place of surplus or strength. We're already stretched thin. But just like last time, it seems the warning signs are being ignored. So, is the Great Depression happening again? And if it does, will it be worse than before? To fully understand this question, we need to look back at a time where it seemed America would never fail. The Roaring Twenties. The country had just emerged from World War I, relatively unscathed, at least compared to Europe, but the war had still left a mark. Americans were weary of rationing, shortages and restrictions. And when the war ended, that weariness turned into a hunger to spend. New technologies, rising wages, and a booming stock market fueled a sense that the good times could last forever. Credit cards, though not plastic ones, began to spread. Issued by individual stores, they let customers buy now and pay later. For many, it felt like free money. By 1929, this spending spree was in full swing. 75% of furniture and 60% of cars were bought on credit. Millions of Americans were drowning in debt without fully grasping the risks. The cracks were already forming beneath the surface. They just didn't know it yet. And this explosion in consumer debt was nothing like America had ever seen. Factories were churning out products faster, cheaper, and in greater quantities than ever before, and the market was ready to meet the insatiable appetite of American consumers. Everyone wanted more and more. The market was roaring alongside it. In just 5 years, it grew by nearly 500%, and profits skyrocketed. But here's the catch. The rewards weren't shared evenly. The top 0.1% of earners were taking home nearly a quarter of all pre-tax income. The gap between the rich and the poor wasn't just widening, it was laying the foundation for something fragile. When wealth concentrates at the top, it creates the illusion of endless growth, while leaving millions exposed if things go wrong. And things were already going wrong. Traders, blinded by profits, were making increasingly risky bets. With little regulation to stop them, Wall Street was gorging on debt, speculating with borrowed money, sometimes up to 90% of the stock's value. The entire system was balancing on a knife edge. Debt had become the fuel, but it was also the match. The rush seemed like it would never end, until it did. On October 28, 1929, the market crashed by 13%. The next day it fell again, by 12 more points. By November, it had lost half of its value. In a month, the entire system was on the brink. Factories shut down. Industrial output collapsed by nearly 50%. Farmers were burning corn for fuel because they couldn't afford coal. And the government, it made things worse. Protectionist tariffs, high interest rates, and clumsy policies turned a national crisis into a global depression. This was a problem of coordination. Across the world, governments didn't trust each other enough to consider effective solutions collectively. Sound familiar? The consequences were catastrophic, but avoidable. This wasn't just bad luck. The signs had been there all along. Ballooning debt, extreme inequality, and a political class asleep at the wheel. We ignored the warnings once. The question is, are we doing it again? This video is sponsored by War Thunder, the most comprehensive vehicle combat game ever made, available on PC, consoles and mobile. War Thunder lets you take command of over 2,500 tanks, planes, helicopters and ships from 10 major nations, spanning from the interwar biplanes to modern fighter jets. War Thunder has one of the most sophisticated vehicle damage models in gaming, as every vehicle is intricately modelled down to the individual components like engines, fuel tanks, weapons and crew, all of which are susceptible to damage or disabling from enemy fire, all with realistic graphics and sound effects. You can now play anywhere with their new mobile version on iOS and Android, which brings full-scale multiplayer warfare to your phone. Download War Thunder for free on PC, PlayStation, Xbox and mobile using the links in the description and the pinned comment. A massive bonus pack is available for new and returning players that haven't played in at least 6 months for PC and consoles. You'll get exclusive Vehicle Decorator Eagle of Valor, 100,000 Silver Lions, and 7 days of a premium account, only for a limited time. Join over 70 million others and experience the war. On the surface, it seems like we've learnt our lesson. After all, most economies eventually bounce back. That's how capitalism works. Cycles of boom and bust, growth and decline. Over time, the dips get smoothed out. Governments have built shock absorbers into the system. Unemployment benefits, stimulus checks, central bank interventions, all designed to keep recessions from spiralling into catastrophe. Ultimately, growth is supposed to trend up in the long run. Since the pandemic, we've been told the economy is growing. Americans are already the biggest spenders in the world, and since the pandemic this has only gotten bigger, outpacing the rest of the G10. Unemployment has rebounded to just above 4%, a 50-year low, and the vast majority of workers have jobs and life seems to be looking up for many. But here's the truth, it's not prosperity, it's leverage, a sugar high which can't go on. If we look at how the American economy grows, it's fueled by consumption, people spending on houses, cars, products, you name it. So as America has been booming, they've been spending. But here's the catch, who's actually paying for it? Consumer debt in the US has surpassed $18 trillion, increasing by over 80% since 2003, which is more than the entire GDP of China. Credit card debt alone has hit a record high, reaching $1.2 trillion by the end of 2024. And it's not just credit cards. More Americans than ever are turning to buy now, pay later schemes just to get through the week. It's a dangerous pattern, people borrowing more, often without fully grasping the risks. And whether it's credit cards, loans, buy now, pay later, it's all the same. Debt used to bridge the gap between rising costs and stagnant wages. This is how bubbles form, slowly, then all at once, because debt doesn't matter until it does. The system only works if people can pay it back, and quietly, more and more can't. Credit card delinquencies have hit a 12-year high, and 4 in 10 Americans have missed a payment on a short-term loan in the past year. All while households struggle, corporations have learned to lean on the same crutch. Many major firms have taken out record levels of debt, not to innovate or expand, but to survive. In some cases, debt has not been used for future growth, but instead for stock repurchases or dividend payouts, prioritizing short-term investor satisfaction over long-term stability. The cracks are spreading, but they're not random. They're the inevitable result of a deeper problem. For the past 40 years, wages in the US have barely kept up with inflation. The average American today has the same buying power they did in 1978, but the cost of living, especially the cost of education, has exploded. College tuition has skyrocketed, and Americans now nearly owe $1.8 trillion in student loans. That's not just a number. It's a sign of a system where families are forced to take on massive debt just to access the same opportunities their parents could afford without it. And the more debt they take on, the more tuition rises. It's a self-perpetuating cycle. As long as there's demand for the promise of the American dream, universities keep raising prices and families keep borrowing, digging deeper into generational debt. But this isn't real growth, it's survival on borrowed time. And it's not just about education. The debt trap feeds into a much bigger issue, one that's quietly shaping the entire economy. It feeds into inequality. Just like in the 1920s, the gap between the rich and poor is growing fast. The richest 1% of Americans now make nearly 139 times as much as the bottom 20%. Wages aren't rising fast enough to keep up, and the result is a system where most people are running harder just to stay in place, while a tiny fraction races ahead. This isn't just about unfair paychecks. Inequality drags the entire economy down. When workers feel stuck, their motivation collapses, productivity slows, and people do less because they expect less in return. That stagnation shows up in the data. In the 1920s, America was building. Factories expanded, assembly lines got faster, electricity reached more homes, and farming became more efficient. Productivity surged. That investment didn't stop the crash, but it helped lay the groundwork for the recovery. Today, we're not building much of anything. Instead of expanding what we can produce, we're stuck in place. Companies aren't focused on long-term growth. They're chasing short-term profits, squeezing the system for every last dollar or shareholder value. Rather than investing in things that build long-term strength, like infrastructure, education, or innovation, companies are pouring billions into stock buybacks and low-wage jobs that offer little future value. In April 2025 alone, US companies announced $230 billion worth in buybacks, the second highest amount ever recorded. But why does that matter? Because in the 1920s, corporations did the same. Profits were artificially inflated through share manipulation and creative accounting. Real investment was neglected, and when the downturn hit, there was nothing underneath to cushion the fall. Today, it's even riskier. This short-termism doesn't just weaken companies, it leaves ordinary people exposed. Over 60% of Americans are invested in the stock market through 401ks, index funds, or retail investing apps. A market crash now wouldn't just wipe out the rich, it would gut retirement accounts, pensions, and middle-class savings. But what about smaller banks? Wall Street might be breaking records, but the high street is struggling to survive. Regional banks are under pressure. Silicon Valley Bank was just the canary, but it wasn't alone. In 2023, 5 US banks failed. 3 more followed in 2024 and early 2025, and nearly $1 trillion in commercial mortgages are coming due this year. And with interest rates climbing, many of those can't be refinanced. This doesn't just squeeze property firms, it threatens the banks that back them. What we're seeing isn't isolated, it's systemic. And what's the response? More borrowing. Federal debt has surpassed $34 trillion, and interest payments alone are now close to $1 trillion a year. To put that into perspective, with that amount of debt, you could buy Tesla 11 times over. There's a pattern: more leverage, more exposure, more risk. And this time, it's not just America. In the 1920s, the financial system was still connected. The gold standard bonded economies, and trade agreements existed. But it was much simpler, much less integrated. Today, supply chains, trade routes, and investment flows are all interconnected. A crisis in the US doesn't just stay in the US. It spreads, faster and deeper than ever before. There's no policy cushion big enough for a reset. There's just more debt, more fragility, and less room to maneuver. So, what about the leadership? Roosevelt's New Deal rebuilt roads, created jobs, and restructured banking. It was bold, imperfect, but transformative. Today, we get gridlock. Congress can't pass a bill without spectacle, and in the 118th Congress, only 1% of proposals became law, a deliberate sacrifice of substance in favour of partisanship. And the Federal Reserve? It's concerned. Raise rates and risk a recession, lower them and reignite inflation. They're stuck, and stuck with them are millions of ordinary families. With inflation still elevated and wages lagging behind, every grocery run feels more expensive, every rent payment more stressful. While policymakers debate percentages and projections, households are budgeting in fear. This isn't abstract, it's felt in bank accounts, dinner tables, and delayed dreams. This time, we're more exposed, more indebted, and more financially fragile. There is no longer a warning, it's a forecast. If this fragile system breaks, it won't be a soft landing, it will be a hard reset. A market crash wipes out savings. They vanish, demand collapses, businesses fail, jobs lost, mortgages can't be paid, homes are foreclosed. And the most dangerous part of all, people lose faith. In the economy, in the government, and in each other. History doesn't repeat itself exactly, but it rhymes, and this rhyme is getting louder. The longer we ignore the imbalance, the more painful the correction will be. The Great Depression wasn't inevitable. It was the product of negligence, greed, and delay. And if nothing changes, something much worse is coming. Again, thank you to War Thunder for sponsoring this video. Don't forget to play it for free on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, or mobile now by using my links in the pinned comment or video description. You and returning players that haven't played in 6 months will also receive a massive bonus pack across PC and consoles, including multiple premium vehicles and other goodies, available for a limited time only, so make sure not to miss it.